Alcohol, how does that affect your sleep? And then movement. How much movement during the day? What does that do for you? And how does it really enhance deep quality restorative sleep? So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to press on the button below, have some fun, and see what tiny little things you can integrate into your life. They're quick, they're easy, they're seamless, they take no time at all. But if you start to think about what you're doing and how you're doing it vastly differently, you too will have more energy on a daily basis. Sleep is your superpower. Eat, drink, movement, and other lifestyle habits. Your habits today inform your biology tomorrow.
About targets, a story about where you will go from here. Now you have your first sale, you've been in business for this past week or however long, so let's think about how you grow and scale from there, okay? So one of the things you want to think about is who are you selling to, and are they buying your product, and are they buying enough of it? And if it's not, do you change your pricing, or do you change who you're speaking to? Think about your targets in terms of how much money do you need to make in a month, and break that down to how many customers does that equate to buying your product or service, or how much of your product or service do you need to sell? And then set those targets. So let's say you need to sell 100 units in this week or 100 units in the month. And if you know that that's what your target is, you need to go speak to a lot of people. Now don't be scared when people say no, or they don't want to talk to you, or they reject you. That's perfectly fine. It's part of the process of selling. What you need to think about is, how do I speak to as many people as possible? So we know that if you speak to 10,000 people, at the end only 1,000 or 100 might buy from you. But the chances are the more people you speak to, the more people will buy from you. So think about, where has your business done really well? Go back to that space and maximize. Speak to more people in that same space, that same industry, or that same type of customer. Think about people who really enjoy your product and get them to buy more of it. And then think about people who might want your product or benefit from your product, but they don't quite know it yet. What are you going to do in the next 100 days to speak to those people so that you can reach your target and meet your numbers? Look out for our next action steps.
Hello everybody, my name is Trevor Waller. I am a writer, teacher and logotherapist, about which I'll speak a little bit later. I'm also the author of 22 Lessons for Now, a guide to crafting a life of meaning and joy. The book was originally titled 22 Lessons for Corona Time and Now. 8 months ago, I set myself the task of renaming, repurposing and rebranding the book. It's been an 8-month odyssey, and the book arrived at my door 2 days ago. In this keynote, I'm going to share some of the lessons from the lessons, as well as my own lessons that I've had to learn along the way. Okay, right. I'd like to start this keynote by asking you to place your hand on your heart for a few seconds. Just listen to its up and down beat. Can you feel it? Our heartbeat, when represented on an ECG, is a beautiful metaphor for life. God, or whoever you believe in, when we were given our heartbeats, was basically giving us a sign of how life looks. Life is literally a series of ups and downs. Up and down, up and down. Yet human beings are very, very strange creatures. In an almost weird way, we wish that life would be a straight line. But a straight line is the very opposite of what life is. When we get this, when we truly, truly internalize and understand that life by its very nature is not a straight line, that in fact we don't want it to be a straight line, then we start to understand the rhythm of life and we stop fighting life itself. We breathe deeply, which is one of the lessons, obviously. We breathe deeply and we accept the fact that while we are alive, we cannot rest for very, very long. Obviously, rest is an important part of life, but life is going to take us up and life is going to take us down. This is the basis of lesson 1 in the book, which is trust the process, otherwise known as TTP. I've been teaching TTP for about 20 years now, and I can honestly say that those 3 letters have the ability to transform your life. In the moments when life is taking us up and when life is taking us down, we need to breathe deeply. I'll always come back to breath because breath is, as I say, it's God's antidepressant. But when we learn to TTP, when we learn to trust the process of life itself, learn to trust the ups and learn to trust the downs, life itself becomes a little bit easier. A lot of people think that TTP is some form of passive resignation. But actually, TTP is not about resigning yourself to what is. It's not oh well, that's life, I'm just going to sit and wait for something to happen. Trusting the process without action, I always say, is wishful thinking. Okay, in order to trust life and in order to trust the process, one has to be continuously taking action. TTP helps when we take action and then we trust. Because we all have a plan, but reality has got other plans in store for us. As I have learned in the last 8 months, as I tried to get this book out. And Madiba, when Madiba was inaugurated, they asked him, how did it feel? How does it feel to be at the top of the mountain? And Madiba uttered the following, what I believe are completely memorable words. I think one of the greatest things he said. And what Madiba said was, I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. What a beautiful, beautiful understanding of life. Because while we are climbing to the top of the mountain, in our minds we think, well, when I get to the top of the mountain, when I reach my goal, I'm going to rest. Rest, obviously, for a little bit, but life will have other plans for you. As we reach a goal, so life will take us on the next journey and on the next journey and on the next journey. That is really how life works. So rather than focusing on what we can control, because so little is really, really, really in our control. And if COVID-19 did not teach us that, and I'll speak a little bit about how COVID-19 affected me and the connection between COVID and this book. If COVID did not teach us that we have so little control over things, then I don't think anything ever will. So the way I implement TTP in my life is that rather than focusing on what I can control, I ask myself a different question. And that question is, how can I influence the situation? Once I have taken all the action, and once I've influenced the situation to the best of my ability, at that point, I have to surrender. I learned in the last couple of weeks, actually, that in readying myself for this keynote and in also readying myself for my book's arrival, I learned that one has to know when to take responsibility and when to surrender. And from that place, we start to TTP and we trust the process. Once I've done everything I can to make sure that my book is ready for this keynote, there is nothing I can do. If something doesn't work, if my designer doesn't show up for me, if Amazon chooses to reject my book for whatever reason, I've done what I can. Once I've influenced the situation, the rest is not up to me. So I take a deep breath and I say, next one, next mountain. When we come back from the break, I'm going to be telling you the story of how I wrote 22 lessons and how COVID was the spur for me to do so.
Let's talk about your test for clients. What is the story your customers are going to remember? Now, when you're thinking about sharing your business story, you want to share the hot, People buy the person, not the product. So you want to think about how do you make that emotional connection with your potential customers or even your already existing customers. And this can even apply to investors. If you have a good story to tell about your business, why you started, cool and interesting things that happened while setting up your business, or even a fun way that you ended up on your product, those create nice stories that people remember, and those customers can connect with you, but they can also go forward and share your story and why other people should support your business. Another good thing to think about when sharing your business story, particularly around your products and services, is to share the difference between the function and the benefits. So it's good to know that you have a phone and your phone can make phone calls, it can send SMSs, you can go online. Those are all great functional aspects. But what are the benefits of people having a phone? They can connect with family, they can take pictures by capturing important moments. Those are the benefits people want to hear about that makes them buy into your business. So you've got this idea, you've got your product, you've got your service, but what's the story? What is the hook that you can share with people that will connect with them emotionally? Write down your emotional connection, the functions of your product and service, but more importantly, what are the benefits that will help people connect with your business and your product? Our action steps will follow shortly.
In 2018, my niece was leaving the country after matric, and I wanted to give her a present to take with her. So I wrote a book called 22 Lessons for her, and I gave it to her when she left the country. The book sat on my laptop for 2 years with the great intentions of actually publishing it, but of course I busied myself with building a business and working, and so I did nothing about it. When President Ramaphosa announced that we were having a 21-day lockdown, something in my brain went, 21 days, 22 lessons, here's an opportunity. And so what I decided to do is, for the first 22 days of what we thought was going to be a three-week lockdown, little did we know, every morning I woke up and I took one of the lessons, and I took the lesson and I repurposed it with a little Corona twist, and I put the lesson onto Facebook. And within 1 or 2 days, friends started commenting, people started following, people started sharing, and I realized that the lessons were really, really resonating for people in this very, very uncertain time. And so, buoyed by the motion, by the feedback, and by the progress that I was making, I wrote, by the end of the 22 days, I had a book. And without knowing it, I actually learned an incredibly important lesson there, and that is that a goal without a deadline is just a wish. And what the 3-week lockdown had actually done for me is it had given me a deadline. And now that I had committed publicly to writing a lesson every single day, there was no backing out. And I had to continue no matter how hard it was. And the first 3 weeks of lockdown were hard for everybody. But I knew every single morning that I had to wake up and I had to post my lesson because people were waiting for it. By the end of the first lockdown, I had a book, I had a website, I had blogs, and I set myself the task of now self-publishing the book, which I did, printed a few copies, people bought them, and I soon ran out of copies and had to print another one. But what happened between the publication of the first and the second edition is I realized that I had left out a very, very crucial story, a story that almost underpins all the lessons. All the lessons are underpinned by an origin story, which I'd like to share with you today. I grew up during the 1970s in a place called Langlaagte in Johannesburg. And it was during the height of apartheid. And like South Africa itself, the hotel was a microcosm of South Africa. White people in the front of the hotel, and black people who were only allowed in the front of the hotel if they were working as servants. And they were, of course, allowed in the big backyard of the hotel, which is where they spent their time, their off time. I was a little child, 7, 8 years old, and my happy place was the hotel and the yard. The yard was where I spent as much time as I possibly could. I would come home from school in the afternoon. I would take my lunch, take my bag, and I would go to the yard where I would do my homework. One day, a young man called Moses, who was a dishwasher, or as they called him in those days, a scullery boy, Moses was watching me do my homework, and he suddenly piped up to me. He said, "I want to be a waiter." So I said to him, "Well, why don't you ask my dad?" Moses looked at me rather sheepishly, and he confessed to me, an 8-year-old boy, that he didn't know how to read or write. I was shocked. I was motoring through Enid Blyton books, and my brain couldn't work out how an adult wouldn't be able to read or write. I think it was my first taste of apartheid and the first understanding of what was going on in our country. But I looked at Moses and I said to him, I'll teach you. I'll teach you to read and write. And I did. I came home from school every single day, and I basically taught Moses what I was learning at school, a little bit of what I had learned in grade 1. In the process, I rediscovered that I love teaching, and one of Moses' greatest gifts to me actually was that I did become a teacher. But much more than that, I taught Moses to read, I taught Moses to write, and Moses became a waiter. Within a year, my dad had promoted him to waiter. And not long afterwards, Moses obviously furthered himself. He got a job, he got a company car. And I learned from Moses 2 very, very, very important lessons that underpin all the lessons in the book. The first lesson that I learned from Moses is that success is up to you. Moses had almost no chance of becoming a waiter, but he grabbed the opportunity of a young child who was willing to help him, willing to teach him. He grabbed the opportunity with both hands, and he took charge of his own life. This lesson is beautifully expressed by a woman called Maria Robinson, who says that nobody can go back and start a new beginning, but anyone can start today and make a new ending. So really, how it starts is not up to us, but how it ends is completely up to us. And so I would implore you almost that to just realize that what you do tomorrow is completely a function of the choices you make today. That's the first lesson I learned from Moses. The second lesson I learned from Moses is encapsulated in a little phrase that I now use, and that is change is a verb. The bottom line is that the universe supports action. And if you want to change, you have to start thinking and doing things differently. There's a beautiful cartoon, which I absolutely love, where a man stands in front of an audience and he says to them, "Who wants change?" And everybody puts up their hands. He then asks a different question, and nobody puts up their hands. And the question he asks is, who wants to change? The bottom line is that if we want change, we have to change. So many of us are waiting for change to come through the door. It doesn't come through the door. The only way that change can happen is if we make new choices. And the way we make new choices is we start to think differently, and then we start to take different action. One of the lessons in the book, which I particularly love, is lesson 13. Lesson 13 is called Choose Again. I heard these words many, many years ago at a workshop in Australia. And when I heard them, something clicked in my brain. And it was, wow. I don't have to be I am not a result of choices that I made in the past. I can make new choices. And life offers us an opportunity to make new choices all the time. That is the lesson that underpins the lessons, all the lessons. If something is not working for you, make a new choice. Choose to think differently about something and choose a different action, and your life will begin to change. Okay. If you're watching this keynote and you have a pen, I'd like you quickly just to grab a pen and just write your name. Take 2 seconds just to quickly write your name. I'll give you 2 seconds for those who are watching, and hopefully you can just write your name. I'd then like to ask you to pick up the pen again, but this time I'd like you to write your name using your non-dominant hand. It'll take a few seconds, and if you don't have a pen, try this exercise after this keynote. The bottom line is that when you write with your non-dominant hand, that is what change feels like. It's a little scary at first, it feels a bit weird, you kind of know how to do it, but you don't quite know how to do it. It's not as perfect as you usually would like it to be, but actually, if you had to write with your non-dominant hand for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, you would actually learn how to write properly. So if you feel that you would like to make a change in your life, and if there is something that you really, really want to be doing, think about it as writing with your non-dominant hand. At first it's difficult, at first it's weird, but if you persevere, it can become your way of being, and your way of doing. I mentioned earlier that I'm a logotherapist, and this keynote would be incomplete if I didn't give you a quick introduction to what has possibly been my greatest influence in my life, and that is a book called Man's Search for Meaning. Man's Search for Meaning was written by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a young psychiatrist during the Second World War, and he found himself interned in Auschwitz, in the concentration camp of Auschwitz. And Frankl watched. He wanted to understand what made people tick. Why did some people share their bread? Why did some people hide their cigarettes? And Frankl watched how some people just gave up and died, and some people were able to find hope. They were able to continue. They were able to sing. They were able to make poetry. And if you read Viktor Frankl's book, he also says we were even able to joke. In fact, Viktor Frankl describes humor as the soul's weapon. And he says even in the worst of circumstances, we were able to find a way to survive. And what Frankl said, and Frankl, I think Frankl is one of Frankl's greatest contributions to 21st century thinking. Frankl said that when you find yourself in a situation that you are unable to change, a situation over which you have no control, which I spoke about earlier, Frankl said that the one thing we always have control over is our attitude. Okay? Nobody can take our attitude away from us, and we can always find an attitude that serves us and that will serve us to achieve our goals and get us to where we want to go. I've deepened this a little bit and deepened this understanding, and what I believe the attitude that we can always find is an attitude of optimism. Some people who read my book and work with me sometimes think that it's all about positive thinking. My book and logotherapy are not about thinking positively. So obviously being a positive thinker helps, but sometimes we don't feel like being positive. Sometimes we're just negative and we don't feel great, and all the negative feelings that come with that. But what I've realized is we can always choose optimism. And a quote that I particularly love that has shifted my attitude in the last year is, people wonder whether the glass is half empty or half full. That is not the point. The glass is always refillable. In South Africa today, a lot of us find ourselves with half empty or half full glasses, depending on how you choose to look at it. Some of our bank balances are half empty. Our electricity is certainly half full, okay? But we can still remain optimistic. Optimism requires you to look towards the future with a benevolent eye, with an eye that says, it may not be great now, but if I start to think differently, if I start to do things differently, if I keep an optimistic eye on the future, I may just find that the outcome is slightly different from the current circumstances. The way we do that, in my view, is we apply lesson 2. Lesson 2, which I've been pleasantly surprised by how many people absolutely love this lesson. It proves for many people to be a game changer. And that lesson is Monday before Tuesday. It is such a simple lesson, but so many of us get caught up in anxiety and worry because we take ourselves into the future. We try and predict the future. We try and predict what other people will do, what they will say, how it will unfold. Again, take a breath, Monday before Tuesday. It really helps to focus and to just do whatever needs doing today. Right, tomorrow will arrive. We don't know what tomorrow will look like, but if you just take that breath and just whatever day you are on, if it's a Saturday before Sunday. Sunday will arrive and you can do whatever you need to do. So the combination of trust the process and Monday before Tuesday make us become what we call present moment aware. And the more we keep bringing ourselves into the present, not taking ourselves into imagined futures of fear and anxiety, and just bring yourself back to the present, calmly bring yourself back to the present, trust the process, and keep repeating to yourself Monday before Tuesday. Do what needs doing today. The future will take care of itself if you are taking action today and giving today your everything. Tomorrow, as they say in Afrikaans, môre is nog 'n dag. Tomorrow is another day. I spoke earlier about the lessons that I've had to learn for myself in this process from 2nd edition to 3rd edition. The first lesson that I've really had to learn is to remind myself that everybody is making it up as they go along. Lesson 5 is make it up as you go along. And lesson 7 is practice patience. Both those lessons have served me in the last 8 months tremendously. Because very often we think everybody knows better than us, or other people are experts. I don't know enough. How can I be this person? But actually, when you calmly recognize that most people are making it up as they go along, and you then allow yourself to practice patience, not only with yourself, but with others, your mindset starts to shift. You start to be less critical on yourself, and you certainly start to be less critical on other people. The other 2 lessons that I've really had to learn along the way is lesson 17, which is show up, and lesson 20, which is drop the comparison. Showing up means exactly what I'm doing here today. I've showed up for the keynote, nerves and all. I've showed up for the address. And in writing the first book and publishing the first book, that was my first act of showing up. I have a message, and I would like people to get the message. I think the message helps, and I think it helps to make your life more calm and more peaceful. But you have to show up, and you have to keep showing up. And then once you've shown up, you need to implement lesson 20. Lesson 20 says, drop the comparison. Stop comparing yourself with others. There will always be somebody more, and there will always be somebody less. It just depends on how you are looking and where you're looking. I often say to people in South Africa, when you stop at the robot and a beggar asks you for money, to him you are completely wealthy beyond measure. Of course, when you go and visit your friend who lives in Sandhurst and you look at their mansion, you will see yourself as poor. It really is relative. So my best advice to you, once you've shown up, is to drop the comparison. The only person you have to compare yourself with is yourself. All we want to do every single day is become better and better than who we were yesterday, and then the next day, better than who we were the day before. And the more we show up and drop the comparison, the calmer our life will be, and the more we will be able to show up for ourselves and for other people. Without a doubt, the lesson that has had the most influence on my life is lesson 3. Lesson 3 is the following: the information is neutral. Let me tell you a little story. No slides. A few years ago, when I still had a full-time paying job, I used to walk my dogs in a park very early. But because I live in Joburg, I used to drive to the park. One day I was coming back from the park, and I stopped at a stop street, and there was a pedestrian waiting to cross. And I like to let pedestrians cross. Joburgers don't really see pedestrians. So as the cars were driving, I gestured to the pedestrian to cross the road. And as she started crossing the road, the car behind me hooted. And it was very early, and it was winter, and I was in a bit of a mood. And I made up a whole story in my mind. I heard this hoot, and I thought to myself, bloody rude person, can't she see that I'm letting a pedestrian cross? And in a moment of complete shame, which I'd rather not be talking about publicly, but it taught me such an important lesson that I'll share it with you. In a split second, I just showed the pedestrian my middle finger. I showed the person behind me, my middle finger. The pedestrian crossed, and I drove home 10 seconds to my house from the stop street. And as I got to my house, my phone beeped. It was in the days before WhatsApp, and I got an SMS. The SMS was from my friend. It said 2 words. It said, "Nice, Trev." You see, the person behind me who had hooted was not someone telling me to drive. It was my friend Simone, and she was taking her friends to school around the corner from my house. The hoot was not what I thought it was. In fact, the hoot had no intrinsic meaning. To Simone, the hoot was a hello. To me, the hoot was drive. And in response to that hoot, I behaved despicably. And the lesson that I learned that day is that the information is truly neutral. People are hooting at us all the time. They are saying things, we are hearing things, and our minds, our brilliant brains, which sometimes serve us and sometimes don't serve us, are interpreting the information all the time. And on the basis of that interpretation, we react. When you get that the information is neutral, you get to slow everything down a little bit, okay? It's almost like a cakeveer, an action replay in sport. You slow the whole process down so that when the hoot comes at you, whatever the hoot may be, it may come in the form of feedback, it may come in the form of a partner's look, and what our brains do is we interpret it, we forget that the information is neutral, and so we react. When you implement lesson 3 in your life, when you take a deep breath, once again we breathe, when you take a deep breath and you realize that the information is neutral and that it may not have the meaning that you think it has, life starts to change, because then you become what Viktor Frankl called response-able. Rather than reacting to everything, you start to respond to things. A response is not a reaction. When we respond, we stop, we observe, we breathe, we evaluate the situation, we ask ourselves, could it have another meaning? Could that person have intended something different? Maybe they don't understand reality the same way we do. And then you respond. Rather than the information coming in and zap signing, please don't zap signing anybody, we stop and we slow the whole process down. And that lesson, which is rooted very, very firmly, is that the information is neutral. This lesson, I know, changed my life. I went from being a reactionary person to being a much more response-able person. Especially as a creative, when you put yourself out into the world, you are going to get feedback from people. When you get that feedback, okay, take a breath. Remember that the information is neutral. Even when the feedback is harsh, it serves a purpose. And rather than reacting, just start responding. And the more we respond, the more responsible we become, the more responsibility we can take for ourselves, the more responsibility we can take for our actions. And we start to recognize, as Susan David said, that a thought is just a thought. Okay? One doesn't have to dissect it and go into it and then react to it. One of the other lessons, which is particularly powerful, which I will be sharing in a mini workshop in a week's time, is lower your bucket. Lower your bucket comes from an amazing story written by a woman called Rebecca Fine, who wrote a story called Afloat in a Sea of Abundance. Rebecca Fine tells the following story, and I only found out much later that it's not a true story, but it's such a powerful story that I'd like to share it with you. In the days when the sailing ships used to sail east-west, the large ships used to land up at the equator. And the water around the equator, because there's no wind in the equator, the ships would get stuck in the equator. And in fact, the area around the equator is known as the doldrums. So when you're in the doldrums, that's where the expression comes from. You're stuck, you have no wind, you can't propel yourself forward. The ships used to land up in the doldrums. And of course, they used to start to run out of food, they used to start to run out of water and start to die. And then the people on the ship would see a ship passing by, and they would say, they would shout to them, water, water, we need water. And a voice would come back from the ship, and the voice would say the following words, lower your bucket. I'll say that again, lower your bucket. Because what the sailors didn't know is that the water around the equator, in the doldrums, the water from the Amazon shoots so strongly into the doldrums that actually you can drink the water. Think about that for a second. The sailors died because their belief was that they could not drink the water. Okay. Lower your bucket is my lesson for all of us, but particularly for entrepreneurs. Okay. Check your beliefs. Okay. Check your beliefs. Our beliefs very, very often do not match reality. And we can die, as Rebecca says, afloat in a sea of abundance. Okay. We live in a country where many people have a scarcity mentality. We live in a world, actually, where many people have a scarcity mentality. They believe that the water is not drinkable. They believe that there is not enough money to go around. And so they are not lowering their buckets. If you're watching this keynote today and you are an entrepreneur, I would urge you to keep lowering your bucket. Put new ideas into the market. Put new product into the market. Test your beliefs. Test those. Keep examining those beliefs. Perhaps the water is drinkable and you are not lowering your bucket. So I would urge you all today, once you've trusted the process and you're taking it Monday before Tuesday, I would say to you, lower your bucket, take the risks, keep checking your beliefs. Check your beliefs about yourself, check your beliefs about others, and check your beliefs about life. If they are no longer serving you, and if new beliefs are required, then lower your bucket. Take your ideas into the market, test reality, and see if possibly what we call reality, which I will talk about on my webinar on Tuesday, if what we call reality is actually reality, and whether we need a whole new set of beliefs about ourselves, about life, and about others. Thank you very much.
So at this point, we've understood that deep, authentic networking is the ability to build mutually reciprocal relationships. As we've said, it's not about going into an interaction saying, what can you do for me? It's about saying, what can we do for each other? How can I assist you? We've looked at that. We've also looked at what stops us. What are the things that sabotage us from building authentic relationships? Now we're going to look at the different types of networking. Because there is casual, incidental, by chance, I just happened to meet somebody in, you fill in the gaps, in a line somewhere, at a school function, at an event, you name it. I just happened to start chatting with somebody networking. It's what I call casual, incidental, by chance networking. Then there's formal strategic networking. I'm interested in a position at X company in X division. Do I know the person that is the decision maker? I have to be strategic in reaching out to that person. Now remember, when we talk about strategy, we're talking about both in person and being strategic virtually. So for example, I go online, I go onto LinkedIn, I look at the company, I look at the division. I found out who is the person who's hiring in that division. Do I have the ability to strategically network? There's also strategic networking if I'm at an event and there's a particular individual I would like to meet. Do I know how to reach that person? And remember that strategic networking can be just a connection. It's up to you to say, do I have the skills to then follow up? So there's strategic networking, there's casual networking. There's also networking or relationship building that takes place when you're on a virtual platform with your team. Are you zoning out, or are you paying attention to team members, some of whom you have never met in person, and saying, am I going to arrange time to connect with that person for a couple of minutes after the meeting so that I get to know them better? So as an exercise, I'm going to ask you to name in your day-to-day or your week-to-week, what are the different environments you're exposed to, and what are the different forums and opportunities that you have to both, and remember what I'm saying, nurture existing relationships, but where are you able to connect with people you've never met before and get to know them so that they become allies in your world?
You're watching HybriCON 2022, and that was fabulous. That was the great Trevor Waller with 22 lessons for now, and it's an amazing story that got us here. Trevor, thank you so much for it. Welcome, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Nico.
Are you breathing?
Thank you for inviting me.
He's breathing now. I
lesson
love
21,
it.
Lesson 21.
I love it. I love it. And I have to tell the audience, I mean, we've only known one another for this period. In fact, while you've been working on this book and we've been talking online, and I've been seeing these marvelous cards being posted and just the most marvelous stories. I think the first one was Lower Your Bucket, and it's been one of my favorites because I just love and relate to that story so well. I want to go back to a little bit of the process of the book first, because it's this remarkable thing that happened. Just tell us again shortly that story about how it happened during lockdown.
So I literally, what actually prompted the thought was I was living by myself during lockdown. Life had taken me to a place where I was by myself. And I obviously work for myself, and I'm an entrepreneur, and my network is everything, as entrepreneurs' network is. And when the lockdown was announced, I suddenly thought to myself, if I don't leave my house for 3 weeks, how are people going to remember that I exist?
Wow.
I really said that to myself. It's like, wow, I can't go out, I can't meet people, they'll forget about me. I'm an entrepreneur. I had lost 2 contracts just as lockdown hit because they involved travel. And I suddenly thought, well, this is a new world we're in. And I don't want people to forget about me. I mean, I thought it was only 3 weeks. If I'd known it was 2 years, I would have probably written 3 books. But nonetheless, the point is that it was almost a way of just reminding the world that I existed, and for them not to forget that it worked.
And it certainly works.
It
And what I love about what you talk about a lot about deadlines and setting yourself goals, and how sometimes life pushes you in sort of directions. And I have to tell the audience that this is also Trevor's first time that he appeared on a camera to do this talk, which was just marvelous. You did such a lovely job. Well done, because I feel like I also pushed you a little bit into this space.
Interestingly enough, this HybriCON provided me with a second deadline. A very important deadline. Because as soon as I knew that I needed to appear on HybriCON, I put the pressure on my designers to get the book up, to get the website up. Now, nothing goes according to plan. As I told you, your plan and reality are very, very different. But the beauty of the deadline meant that my books, my printer, my designer, it literally arrived at my door, and I kid you not, at 5:22 on Friday afternoon. Without the deadline, we'd all still be faffing around. It's a little bit like the lockdown deadline. Without that deadline, there'd be no first book. Without this deadline, there wouldn't be a 3rd edition, and I'm very, very grateful to you for that.
Well, thank you. We're so very, very grateful that you shared so many of the lessons, and I love it. And I have to also, I want to ask you about the translation, because you suddenly a few weeks ago started showing cards that were also in Zulu.
In Zulu, yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I have a beautiful project. I work with entrepreneurs in rural KZN around the Umfolozi Park. I do a combination of personal development and entrepreneurial development with them. And I went to teach them last year. Rural, we're talking rural, more rural than very, very rural, if there's such a thing, but really, really rural. And all my material gets translated into Zulu by my client for the entrepreneurs. And I taught them some of the lessons.
Nice.
And I realized when I was teaching them that there's very, very little available in the personal development space in African languages. And I call them my entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs got it. They got trust the process. They got the information is neutral. They got lower your bucket.
Beautiful.
And in getting it, I realized that I live in Africa. We live in South Africa. Our market is much more than our urban English-speaking market, and we sometimes forget that there's a whole market of African language speakers who don't have access to the podcasts that we have, who don't have access to the books that we have.
Digital stuff,
Yeah,
for sure.
So step 1 of the process of translating 22 lessons is I've translated each lesson into Zulu. So it's a very simple translation. I know you love the graphics of the cards, so the combination of the graphics and the Zulu. Zulu is my first project. My next language I'm going to is Setswana.
Fantastic.
And we're going to slowly translate the lessons, and then also translate, I have text for the cards, short pieces of text, because another thing in South Africa, I know I'm generalizing, but South Africans are not great readers. We know this, right? They don't read.
Well, the whole world, everyone's just digital. Sort of get the highlight or something, yeah?
So a little paragraph that just explains the lesson. We'll explain it in English, or we'll explain it in Zulu. And so I want to open my work up to the African market. I don't want to limit myself just to English market. The English market, when it comes to self-help and personal development, there's a lot of material.
I have to also just praise it or add to it that the fact that these stories are so universal and can so land right across the board in short, punchy kind of lines, a simple graphic and a beautiful line, that is absolutely hats off to you, because your messages are so clear.
Thank you.
And
very much.
we're going to take a short break. If you're interested in the book, where can people find the book?
Red Pepper Books online.
Yeah.
It's available at the moment at Red Pepper Books online. And then it will be available on all the platforms in the next week through my website, 22lessons.com, which is a couple of days away from going live.
Excellent.
Because I had a plan and there was reality.
And reality stepped in.
Yeah.
We're going to have a quick break as a reality, and we'll be back right after this.
We've put all the great High Noon live shows in one place for your convenience. Look out for H&L's greatest moments. Next, make a day to catch us live right here on LinkedIn. On Mondays, catch Sikim Kize with business, how-to and mentorship. On Tuesdays, Ursula Buerta with confidence and presence. Wednesdays, see Nikki Bush dancing with disruption, women empowerment and reinvention. On Thursdays, Nico Stain with storytelling, structure and presentation. And Fridays, Joni Petty presents sleep, resilience and bouncing forward. Watch High Noon live on LinkedIn. Weekdays at 12, South African Standard Time.
This is HybriCON 2022. I'm Nico Stain and I'm speaking to Trevor Waller. Thank you so much again for making it to the studio today. And we're talking about your book and particularly about your work about 20 lessons for now. 22 lessons for now.
22, the very important.
That is. Talk a bit about that.
So I'm a little bit of an even freak. I love even things, and I've always loved even things. I like things to be even. I like to eat 2 sweets, and I like to do things. I like double. I like even.
Okay.
And it's a bit of a family joke with me. People will never give me 1 sweet, they give me 2 sweets,
Lovely.
and everybody knows. So along the way with my niece, we would, 22 became our thing. So we'd be driving in the car and it would be 5:22, and I would be like 5:22, and then we would see it as a sign. So 22 just became our thing. And it is 2022, remember? 22.
It is.
So
all of those
maybe
reasons.
it's bigger than me. But so when I wrote my book for my niece, I had to have 22 lessons, and I found there were 22 lessons.
Excellent. I feel like they can be a good 22 more because they're so marvelous.
There are another 22
and they're coming. There you go. Well done.
Yes.
Now I want to talk about, this is based on the work that you do with entrepreneurs and training. Talk a little bit about your coaching and how do you train entrepreneurs, because I think it's a little bit off kilter from the normal way, right? It sounds.
Yeah, a little bit.
I think so.
So for me, as I explained a little bit earlier, it all starts with your thoughts, right? And then you have to take action. The problem is that very, very often entrepreneurial training jumps into action too quickly. Okay, and we're taking action, but our thoughts, our thinking, is faulty.
Still catching up.
Our belief systems about ourselves, about life, about others, are not in kilter. And so for example, if I have a scarcity mentality, if I have a scarcity mindset, there's no real point in. I mean, I can go and do whatever I like, but am I going to get what I need? Am I going to lower my bucket? So for me, when I work with entrepreneurs, the first thing I do is I focus on how they are thinking about themselves. Mindset. Yeah. How they are thinking about themselves, how they are thinking about others, and how they are thinking about life. And using the lessons, I just give them, I don't want to say correct their thinking, because that's a little bit, I'm not correcting anybody's thinking. I'm just giving them a little bit of a different perspective. Just a little bit of perspective so that they can, that the entrepreneurial journey can be a little bit lighter. One of the lessons is travel light. Okay, I love travel light.
Yes, I remember that one.
You know, and I often say sometimes about travel light, it's almost like when you go to the airport and they say to you, do you want to check in your baggage? And you go, no, thanks, I'll schlep it. Yeah. You know, and I'll take it, like I'll schlep it up the stairs and I'll try and get it into that overhead compartment and it'll fit, you know. And I sometimes look at those people, because I'm one of those, check it in, let them handle your baggage, you know. And I feel a little bit the same way about entrepreneurs, you know, like we come to life with so much baggage. We all come to life with so much baggage. And now we're trying to build a business, we're trying to build a life. But the bags are heavy, you know. So the work that I do with entrepreneurs is just to help them to put down some of that baggage. Sometimes the baggage is faulty thinking. And when you get your thinking clear, and you start to think clearly about yourself and what you want to achieve. So that's the first thing I do. Okay. And all my learnings, all my teachings and my trainings and the book, I've incorporated into a course. The course is called I Matter. Another gift that I got from my entrepreneurs in Zululand, in KwaZulu-Natal last year, because in the 3 days that I spent with them doing personal development, when I went back to them 2 months later to do the business part, the one thing that they had taken away, the biggest message that they had taken away from those 3 days were when I said to them, you matter.
Marvelous.
You are a person
Marvelous.
of significance and worth in this world, and you matter. And when they gave me that feedback, I thought, wow, that's it. Hey, I matter, you matter. And if I matter and you matter, and then we all matter.
That's registering big on the scale. Absolutely. And I also think, I mean, listening to you, you're working in rural areas and you're working with entrepreneurs where sometimes in the grown-up world of entrepreneurs, it's about millions and unicorns and stuff, and we forget often that it's also there are many entrepreneurs who are just survivalists, and their perspective is entirely different of what a fortune means. And I think that the scalability and the way that they go about working and the way that they should think is rightfully so very, very different, isn't it, from traditional entrepreneurship?
In the business component of the training last year, we were talking about expenses, cash flow and expenses. And one of the entrepreneurs told us that her biggest business expense was paying the boys every morning to go and fetch water from the river in the wheelbarrows. Okay, it was such a clap. It was such a perspective clap.
Yes.
That I can come with my fancy diagrams of the entrepreneurial stages, and you go from this stage, you go to that stage. This woman just has to make sure she has money to get water to run her business.
Spectacular.
That's the perspective. So for me, yes, there is the entrepreneurship. There's many forms of entrepreneurship. I like working with survivalists.
Beautiful.
I like working with not only with survivalists. I also like to work with small businesses that have grown to a certain point, so they've succeeded, 40, 50 people, and the owner, founders are looking at each other going, what? Did we sign up for this? Suddenly there's HR and suddenly there's people, and so I use iMatter to go into small businesses and just help the whole staff, from CEO to cleaning lady. To just learn to communicate properly, learn to think properly, learn to think not positively, but learn to think a bit more clearly.
To adjust
Come
that
to work
perspective.
with a little less baggage. Learn to greet each other, which is we talk about culture. Culture is a huge part of our country. We ignore it. We don't like to talk about it. And
Beautiful. Now, if somebody is from a corporate or some large company is looking at this at the moment and they wanted to know about how you go about working or get hold of you, how do people get hold of you?
It's very easy, Trevor, at 22lessons.com.
There we go. 22lessons.com. But there are more to come. So we're talking to Trevor Waller. Check out the website. Do check out the book. And we'll be back right after this.
So if you're perhaps waking up feeling a little tired, a little gritty, a little kind of moody, maybe you're not sleeping well. Sleep is your superpower. Eat, drink, movement, and other lifestyle habits. We talk about quantity of sleep, and we should be getting a certain number of hours, but really that's only half the story. We want that deep, slow wave sleep that makes you feel fantastic the next day. It's all about energy, va-va-vum. How do you work? How do you self-lead? How do you live your life vastly differently if you make sleep your superpower? On this course, you're going to learn about food. What should we eat? What is really going to enhance your sleep or detract from a good night's sleep? You're going to learn about alcohol. How does that affect your sleep? And then movement. How much movement during the day? What does that do for you? And how does it really enhance deep quality restorative sleep? So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to press on the button below, have some fun, and see what tiny little things you can integrate into your life. They're quick, they're easy, they're seamless, they take no time at all. But if you start to think about what you're doing and how you're doing it vastly differently, you too will have more energy on a daily basis. Sleep is your superpower. Eat, drink, movement, and other lifestyle habits. Your habits today inform your biology tomorrow.
It's HybriCON 2022, and I'm talking to Trevor Waller, who's just given us a keynote that was marvelous. And we've been talking about your fabulous book, 22 Lessons for Now.
A Guide to Crafting a Life of Meaning and Joy.
Which I should add.
Yeah, no,
I
you
should
don't have to add
yes,
it. It's a new subtitle that I didn't have before.
How did that come about?
It came about because my designer said, Trevor, good books have subtitles.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
but we worked very, very hard on exactly what we wanted to say. And I was very purposeful in the languaging. So first of all, meaning and joy. Okay, so because I'm a logotherapist, I err on the side of meaning. Okay,
Yes.
Viktor Frankl said that human beings are meaning-making machines. We didn't quite say that, but we make meaning
That's
of our
fantastic.
experience all the time. And I think that life, we need to focus on both meaning and joy. It's not just about happiness and pleasure, and it can't just be about meaning. You can't just be searching for meaning and be desperately unhappy, and you can be desperately unhappy, but I've got meaning. You know, it's like, okay, we need to find a balance between happiness or joy and meaning. And then the word crafting is a very, very, very purposefully chosen word as well, because it speaks to the action.
Beautiful.
You know? You have to craft that life. You know, when I first became a writer, my mentor at the time, she used to use the word craft. When I gave her a first draft, she said to me, Trevor, it's great, but you have to go back and craft it. Craft it. Okay. And so I see the writing process.
It's an ongoing work of art.
And so are our lives.
Yeah,
they're ongoing. We have to craft our lives, you know. And if you think about the notion of crafting, it's a very purposeful.
It's
committed,
meticulous, and it's a process.
So we craft our lives. You know, life. You know, you can't just wake up to. You can't just wake up to a happy, meaningful life. You have to put in the effort. We have to work.
You have to make the work.
Yeah.
Now. You can already tell that Trevor's webinar is going to be fantastic. That's coming up this week. And you can also tell that workshop that he's going to do is one of my favorite stories that you have, which is lower your bucket. Do you want to talk a little bit about the webinar, what people could look forward to in that one?
Yeah, sure. So in the webinar, I'm going to focus on the first 3 lessons in a little bit more detail. That's trust the process, Monday before Tuesday, and the information is neutral. Because I really, really, really want to deal with the issue of trust in a time of uncertainty. One of my theories about entrepreneurship is that if you can't handle uncertainty, keep your day job. Okay. For me,
there are a lot of juggling balls and anything can come down.
For me, the greatest requirement of success as an entrepreneur, I would say life generally, but certainly as an entrepreneur, is that you have to learn to lean into uncertainty, and you have to keep leaning and get comfortable with the uncertainty. You know, and every now and again, a person will come and see me. They've got a job, and they want to run their own business. And that's the only question I ask them. Are you comfortable with uncertainty? Because they say that the 3 greatest addictions in the world are sugar, heroin, and a monthly paycheck. Okay. So now I'm not saying if you're employed and you get your monthly paycheck, wonderful, enjoy it. Enjoy every minute of it. But as an entrepreneur, you have to let go of that addiction. You have to let go of that monthly ping. Okay, so it requires you to get very, very comfortable with uncertainty, and so I'll be talking about that in the webinar.
Excellent.
Like how do we get comfortable with uncertainty?
And then there's the workshop.
The mini workshop is going to go into lower your bucket in depth, and then we're going to tap into abundance thinking and abundance mindset, because again, I think a prerequisite for success is that you believe that the water is eminently drinkable and that there's a lot of it. You know,
there's abundance everywhere.
There's abundance,
absolutely.
You know, and it's difficult because there are people that don't have, and I'm acutely aware of the fact that there are people that don't have. But even my entrepreneurs, some of the entrepreneurs have done brilliantly in KZN. So that's not about that. But they live in real scarcity. You know, they live with no water and they live without electricity. And so but when they start to tap into abundance, when they start to believe that the water is drinkable, when they start to think about it differently, stuff starts to change. So in the mini workshop, I'll talk much more about lowering your bucket and what does it mean, and how we can implement it in our lives.
That's just marvelous, and we're really looking forward to that. Thank you very much for today. Thank you for the talk. It was lovely.
Thank you for having me.
It was really gorgeous. And again, if people are interested in 22 lessons, for now, a guide to crafting a life of meaning and joy, where can they find it?
At the moment, redpepperonline.co.za. And during the course of this week, it will be everywhere, Kindle, Amazon, and
Excellent. Excellent. We wish you the very, very best of luck with it.
Thank you, Nico.
Thank you very much. And thanks for watching HybriCON 2022. That was a special Sunday. We really enjoyed having Trevor in the studio, and it was really marvelous, marvelous lessons that I could listen to the stories every single time. Till another time, thanks a lot. Cheerio.